dying, but it just became tyrannical and is the origin of the word draconian. Another example comes from 3rd century BC China, where the legalist Qin dynasty also had a very similar system where they had the death penalty for very minor things, and what ended up happening was that the revolution that destroyed said regime happened because a group of men were supposed to arrive at an army muster point, but they ran late due to having a lot of rains in their area and flooding. And then, because the penalty for arriving late was death, they just launched the revolution that destroyed said regime because they were dead men anyway. Lots of people will say that countries like modern North Korea are fear-based. And that's partially true, but I don't count them here as that because they don't have the fear-based cultural system and all the history that comes with the idea of various gods built off fear. If you're looking at a totalitarian regime in which people only follow that regime out of fear, what's normally the case is that people supported the revolution to get that regime in power, operating off a different moral axis, like we'll talk about envy or disgust later, but since that moral axis is weak, once the government seizes power, they default back onto fear as the most powerful motivator to keep people supporting the regime. Number 2, shame. Shame is by far the biggest of these emotions across history. It's still the case that a majority of cultures around the world, and especially a majority of the world's inhabitants, are driven off shame. It's most powerful in the big Asian civilizations, with Pakistan, Japan, China, Iraq, and the like, being some very shame-driven cultures. However, most cultures, even outside Asia,
står hyggehulen helt ubeboet hen, fordi internettet ikke rækker. Hos Nordlys får du stabilt og hurtigt internet med flere wifi-enheder, så du kan få liv ud i alle hjemmets hjørner.
My name's Dan Snow, and I want to tell you about History Hit TV. It's like the Netflix for history. Hundreds of exclusive documentaries and interviews with the world.
Across the American colonies, Republican and radical politicians were defying Britain's authority. No longer dependent on British protection from the French or First Nations, they began to reflect on their place in the empire. Many resented paying taxes for colonial defense and maintenance without receiving representation in Parliament. Worse still, the king had tried to protect the rights of First Nations and new French-Canadian subjects at the expense of their ambitions. North America was a powder keg ready to explode.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Repressed passions, anything ugly or dirty, came under the same injunction.
For thine is the kingdom.
The survivors flee southwards to Salem. In the eyes of the devout Puritans, the French and the Native Americans are one and the same.
Which is all very well by itself, but it's a serious lesson to learn from it.
Salem is on the edge of the English Crown Colony. It is threatened to the north by the French, who have Native American tribes on their side. Together, they attack the outlying settlements and slaughter the inhabitants. Any survivors flee southwards to Salem. In the eyes of the devout Puritans, the French and the Native Americans are one and the same, the boogeyman, the devil incarnate, who lurks in the woods.
Outside Asia are shame-based, with it either being dominant or a big minority across Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and also pretty powerful in pre-Christian European civilizations like the Roman Empire or the ancient Greeks. In fact, the only major area of the world that has basically no shame is Western Europe and Western civilization. I have a lot of respect for this social system since it's by far the most stable and best tested, stretching back thousands of years and developing independently across the world. Shame develops when a society needs to operate on a certain scale of size. Hunter-gatherer peoples, with the Native Americans of the current United States often being a great example, are often incredibly individualistic. But once you get into large farming urban societies, shame-based cultures start to predominate. In these societies, an individual is the pawn of their family. These societies live in large clans, with people often working, marrying, and living together as a family, with the clan providing strength in numbers.
1534, and the King of France is a bit angry. The King, Francis I of the House of Valois, was unhappy because overnight posters had sprung up across France denouncing Catholicism and its practices as evil. The King, who was a devout Catholic, was horrified, mostly because he'd been quite tolerant of the nascent Protestant movement up until now, and also because one of said posters had been stuck to his bedroom door. Francis could no longer tolerate Protestantism, and so he rounded up those responsible and also some who weren't responsible and burned them at the stake. The persecutions led to many Protestants, the most notable being John Calvin, fleeing to Switzerland. His religious persecutions continued throughout the rest of his reign, which would end in 1547. Due to death. He was succeeded by his son, Henry II, who continued the persecution of Protestants. He created a new court for the prosecution of heresy called the Burning Chamber.
The king had tried to protect the rights of First Nations and new French-Canadian subjects at the expense of their ambitions. North America was a powder keg ready to explode. On April 19, 1775, at Lexington, Massachusetts, a shot heard around the world lit the fuse.
Imagine that we live in that world and we know that there are evil forces out there and that they look to harm us.
In numbers. Arranged marriages are the norm, and the individual is basically given very little choice in life. These societies deflect responsibility from the individual to the group. The most purely shame-driven societies without other axes are the rice farming cultures, where rice farming is so labor-intensive and groupish that groups that sacrificed the individual for the group did the best. An interesting thing is that a gene that controls for a lot of risk-taking, extroversion, and the like varies from 80% in the fear-driven native peoples of the Amazon to 0% among the East Asians, since those kinds of people didn't survive in the conformity-based rice farming societies. Interesting studies show that people in shame-based cultures literally view the world differently. When looking at
The kidnapper's call gave us new hope.
La speranza nel senso di umanità di chi abbia responsabilità di questo caso.
The Pope's words took us by surprise. They referenced information that we, Emanuela's family, didn't have. He spoke of those responsible. He implied that Emanuela had been kidnapped. This was an astonishing revelation. But why hadn't the police told us this? And what else might the Pope know about Emanuela's whereabouts? Words may have been intended for Emanuel's kidnappers, but they also moved a local traffic patrolman to come forward with an important tip about the day my sister went missing.
Alfred, blessed day. Please, come on up. You will not leave this room, do you understand me? Do you understand me?
Thomas Jefferson. Martha Jefferson died due to health problems at the age of 33, and Sally Hemings began an intimate relationship. While Jefferson was well into his 40s, Sally was only 16. Whether or not Sally entered the relationship voluntarily remains under heated debate. But one thing is clear, Sally became pregnant. She returned to the United States with Jefferson and continued to live on Monticello Plantation. Hemings would go on to have 4 more children that were rumored to be fathered by Jefferson. Historians believe that she gave birth to them in the secret room that was recently discovered. Sally Hemings returning to the United States with Jefferson does not necessarily mean she was complicit.
Jeg synes bare, det er meget påfaldende, at det danske flag skal være hvidt i midten, ikke? Altså, det krænker mig.
Danmark er ved at svømme over med krænkelser. Derfor opretter regeringen nu et krænkelse.
Det er ikke alene et spørgsmål om, at der er en frihed i at gå klædt sådan her. Det er lige så meget friheden til at kunne vælge at gå klædt sådan her, hvis jeg vil det. Ja. Det er lige så meget der, friheden ligger for mig. Ja. Det er i det frie valg. Lige så vel som alle andre.
Men hvordan frisætter det? Når du går ned ad gaden sådan der, hvordan føler du dig så mere fri?
Jamen, det gør jeg bare. Jeg kan ikke forklare det. Det gør jeg. Jeg føler mig mere fri.
Også når du sidder over for mig og taler med mig?
Ja, det gør jeg.
Du føler dig mere fri, end hvis du ikke er sådan på?
Absolut. Det er en befrielse for mig at kunne gå klædt sådan.
Alle mine veninder har blevet en eller anden form for overgreb, om det er voldtægt eller bare grænseoverskridende adfærd. Og det gør, at man går og tænker på, hvornår det bliver mig, der bliver voldtaget.
Excuse me. Jeg vil så sige, at jeg er 24 år gammel. Jeg er ikke bange for at sige fra. Jeg er kendt for altid at sige min mening. Jeg er blevet...
Jeg synes bare, det er meget påfaldende, at det danske flag skal være hvidt i midten. Ikke? Altså, det krænker mig.
Danmark.
So this is the girl's friend who's going to help them kind of lure out the bride. They're negotiating with her right now, or just planning how to do it.
Сендемир жардам болсун бизге. Жардам болуп кой. Досуңга.
Мушка чыга албай атат экен деген бир белги болуп калат да, ошондон баш тартылат.
Жөнү терден чаман айып эмес, образга кирип алышты да буларда.
Well, everybody's all smiles. I hope she likes her groom.
Der står også, at der er en grund til stadig at fortælle de yngre generationer, at man godt må sige nej. Og det er jo også en påstand, der leder hen til, at jeg stadigvæk vil mene, at det er en kultur, der hersker.
Er det rigtigt?
Der er den her debat altså ved at reducere moderne, danske, duelige kvinder til nogle meget små, ynkelige ofre, som hele tiden skal være bange for at stille sig frem, ikke kan tage vare på en situation i deres eget liv med et konkret andet menneske, og så er nødt til at appellere til, at vi laver en samtale om struktur og kultur.
Jeg vil så sige, at jeg er 24 år gammel. Jeg er ikke bange for at sige fra. Jeg er kendt for altid at sige min mening. Jeg er blevet krænket utallige gange på min arbejde.
Jeg synes bare, det er meget påfaldende, at det danske flag skal være hvidt i midten. Ikke? Altså, det krænker mig.
Danmark er ved at svømme over med krænkelser. Derfor...
Jamen, vi køber aldrig noget ved dørene. Jeg kender godt deres slags. Før man ved det, så har man både støvsug og højfjeldssol og leksikon i 10 bind. Vi kan jo alligevel ikke have det med i flyveren.
Bare ens mand har fast arbejde, så er de så flinke alle sammen.
Jeg kommer fra Valby SS.
SS. Der står også, at der er en grund til stadig at fortælle de yngre generationer, at
Jamen, vi køber aldrig noget ved dørene. Jeg kender godt deres slags. Før man ved det, så har man både støvsug og højfjeldssol og leksikon i 10 bind. Vi kan jo alligevel ikke have det med i flyveren.
Bare ens mand har fast arbejde.
Det er ikke alene et spørgsmål om, at der er en frihed i at gå klædt sådan her. Det er lige så meget friheden til at kunne...
Jeg synes bare, det er meget påfaldende, at det danske flag skal være hvidt i midten. Ikke? Altså, det krænker mig.
Danmark er ved at svømme over med krænkelser. Derfor opretter regeringen nu et krænkelsesministerie.
Det er jo krænkende, at det hedder menstruation og ikke womanstruation. Men det er jo en af de mange måder, patriarkatet holder os nede. Hvad dag er det i dag?
Det er mandag.
Mandag?
Okay, ready to explode. On April 19th, 1775, at Lexington, Massachusetts, a shot heard around the world lit the fuse. The rebels who styled themselves the Patriots weren't only fighting the British Army. They'd have to kill their own people as well. Both sides saw the Iroquois warriors as either an important ally or potential threat. No political maneuvering could spare them now. Across the narrow channel, England's unification with Scotland in 1707 had made Great Britain into a Protestant bastion at the heart of an expanding empire. Caught between them were a shifting network of allies, creating a balance of power which prevented either side's total defeat. Britain couldn't defeat France on the continent, but their fleet could isolate.
Du kan forvandle dig selv derhjemme. Bare sig til dig selv, du ikke er sulten. Du er bare tørstig. Baby Botox er fantastisk.
Nations of Darkness, download for free.
Imagine that we live in that world.
In numbers. Arranged marriages are the norm, and the individual is basically given very little choice in life. These societies deflect responsibility from the individual to the group. The most purely shame-driven societies without other axes are the rice farming cultures, where rice farming is so labor-intensive and groupish that groups that sacrificed the individual for the group did the best. An interesting thing is that a gene that controls for a lot of risk-taking, extroversion, and the like varies from 80% in the fear-driven native peoples of the Amazon to 0% among the East Asians, since those kinds of people didn't survive in the conformity-based rice farming societies. Interesting studies show that people in shame-based cultures literally view the world differently. When looking at photos, Japanese or Chinese point out details in the background, and Westerners look at the main character. Westerners see the world through cause and effect, while Orientals is a series of different holistic relations. The advantage of shame-based culture is just their sheer inner strength. Writers used to talk about the immortal East, or how empires would rise and fall in the West, but China and India have always stood there, taking often the worst suffering possible, casually losing tens of millions of lives, but they keep their spirit and keep doing their thing. As I talked about in this video, family is possibly one of the most important factors in how society.
Всем привет! Это шоу «Кнопка» на канале Тремпель Прод. У нас новые правила. Теперь никто не спрашивает о гороскопах и о возрасте тоже. Вы просили, и мы сделали. Ставь лайк и смотри это крутое видео.
So, weird study to post to make a bad point, Dr. Peterson. Oh, and by quit Twitter, I of course mean he, just kept tweeting, like, constantly. The one who decided to tweet totally unprompted about this woman who did nothing to him, or apparently for him. His whole point was that Sports Illustrated was trying to push a false idea of beauty.
Смотри это крутое відео.
Я Таня.
Я Илья.
В тебе є мрія, яка ти знаєш, яка ніколи не збудеться?
Что?
У тебя есть мечта, которую ты знаешь, которая никогда не сбудется?
Нет такого.
Нет такого?
Всегда все сбывается. Что тебя в последнее впечатлило?
Работаючи з фотографом, мене дуже удивила халатність режисера на площадке.
Я хочу еще посмотреть на него.
Ладушки.
Привет,
Юлечка.
Илья. Ты так подготовилась, прям такое платье.
Ну я же на свидание
я прям,
пришла.
у меня нет костюма.
Если бы были цветы, было бы получше.
Ой, я не люблю цветы.
Лучший твой цветочек — это я.
Я не люблю цветы, честно. Не люблю их дарить, потому что это бессмысленно. Лучше подарить себя.
Лиза, где учишься?
Не учусь.
Где
Закончил. Не люблю про работу говорить. Влад.
Алина, очень приятно.
Работаю в алкогольном магазине.
Fortress. Play free now.
And we know that there are evil forces out there and that they look to harm us. but we can't even say for sure.
Salem Village.
Anyone and everyone among them might be a witch and Satan's willing helper. There was no stopping the religious madness. It was to cost many lives and leave the community in Salem.
Good God, you're over here like it's spring fucking break and I still don't have that billing report. Why do I even keep you around, Wesley?
Get it done, Janice.
Oh, like I never heard that before. I'll get it done. I'll get it done.
It won't cost much, just your voice, you poor unfortunate soul. It's sad.
I understand. Junior high must have been kind of tough.
Sage fucking popsicle, I still don't have my billing reports, but you've got time to sit here and Google your ass off. Well, I know one thing. You've got your review coming up next week, and I can't wait.
She can fly. She's just hovering. It's not that impressive. God, do you have to undermine everything that I do? You are such a player hater.
You're a jerk. Wow, nice insult, Hannah Montana. You got any more harsh digs? You know what?
Med Suzuki S-Cross får du endelig noget, børnene ikke vokser ud af. Nemlig en stor SUV med masser af udstyr, 1.500 kilo på krogen og plads til hele familien. For kun 255.000. Suzuki. Forvent mere.
I understand. Junior high must have been kind of tough, but it doesn't give you the right to treat your workers like horseshit, Janice. I know we laugh at you, Janice. We all know.
Next week, and I can't wait to start checking me off some big fucking boxes.